Can you guys hear me? Yeah, all right. Looks like they're going to start closing the doors, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming, and it's 6 o'clock, so thank you all for staying. I hope Tech Ed is going as well and exciting for you this year as it is for me. I was at the pre-conference yesterday, and it was genuinely one of the best times I've had in a long time, and then the stuff that I've seen today I've been very happy with. I'm Jim Wilt, and I'm going to be talking on ICE's 5 pillars of IT architecture. And I am not a Microsoft employee, although I've been working with Microsoft probably, I would say, directly over the past 13 to 14 years. Most of the work I do now is with the Office of the CTO and their group and the ITAF consultants and things like that. But my company's called Metrics Reporting. I'm a partner. I'm the chief software architect. We're a boutique consultancy. We do strategy and innovation for mostly Fortune 100 organizations, which is a very select clientele that we don't really share who our clients are, because we work mostly as a think tank for them. I have a passion for architecture, and ISA I've been dealing with since its beginning, and I'm currently an ISA instructor, and I'm C2P certified, and I've been teaching the ISA Foundations curriculum that we're going to be covering with the 5 Pillars talk today all over the world. I was just in Madrid a few weeks ago. I'll be in India doing 3 weeks of training for the 2nd time this year, next month. So I'm very excited about this. I'm very excited to see this many people here, which leads me to ask a couple questions that I was writing down as I was thinking about this. First of all, I'm going to kind of get out of the light so I can see hands. How many of you have the word architect in your title right now? Okay. Wow. Great. I think we're done. I expect to see fewer hands based on what I just saw. How many of you are here because you're curious about what the definition of an IT architect is? Okay, great, great, great. The last question is, how many are here because it's been a long day and you need a soft chair to sit in? Okay, we got one. All right. So there's a few things that I want to cover, and one is the goal based on the questions I just asked. One of the things that we're asking ourselves in the industry, and I'm an architect too that asks the same question, is, am I or do I want to be an IT architect? And here I'm certified, and I still find myself asking that question. And I think at the end of this, you're going to be able to answer that question a little better for yourself. The secondary goal, and it's kind of like running a marathon. I run marathons. I just ran one a few weeks ago. The first goal is to finish the stinking thing, right? Just to finish it. The second goal is to maybe place in your age group first, second, or third. And the third goal is usually to be a placement overall. I've never made my second or third goals, but I have finished the ones that I've run. So a secondary goal would be, how do I interact with IT architects? This is going to be talking about the pillars, the tenets of what architecture is, and if you are an architect, how you interact with peer architects. If you're not an architect, how is it that I interact with architects for my best purposes and theirs? And thirdly, how can I execute on my personal growth? And I'm going to be honest with you, there's some great material at the very end where we're going to talk about personal growth. And I think that's and you're going to want this deck and take it with you, whether you like the talk or not. I apologize if I offend anyone. I am dyslexic. I want to let you know, please call something out. If I'm saying something that's different than what you see up there, I do that not on purpose. It's because I am dyslexic. My son's dyslexic also. And if you're ever at a meal with the two of us, we can have a beautiful conversation with each other that nobody understands. So it's just kind of one of those things. And the last thing, well, I said is on personal growth. But to start out, does anybody know what ISA is or who ISA is? Is anybody a member of ISA? Just kind of, I can't see it as well. Okay. The International Association of Software Architects. ISA, I want to concentrate on the I's and the A's. Software is a debate that we're having right now because it's not just software architects. But international it is. It's worldwide. It's an association, and it's about architects. And that's what ISA is. And if you were to kind of do a timeline history of it, Paul Price, coming across the screen right now, founded ISA in 2002. By 2003, it was a 501-6C organization, which means it's a bona fide organization. Then comes along Andy Ruth, the MCA founder, Microsoft Certified Architect, which I'm sure you've heard about in the past. He's put certification into what Paul started. And then we've got a whole host of fellows. If you look at this list, it's a really cool who's who, and they're all part of ISA. In ISA's definition of themselves on their website, I highlighted the point where it says it's a preeminent knowledge-based association focused on the IT architecture profession. Two things: knowledge base. It's based on knowledge, and it's about architects. Two strong things. 70,000 members in 50 countries, and I put some pictures of just the people I've interacted with this year. And it definitely is about architecture. Paul created it because he was an architect, and he realized architecture is going to be big. This is 2002, when it was just coming out. If you've got, I'm going to say, 20 years of experience and you're an architect, you probably were at the very beginning of when architecture was becoming a real profession. So that's the short history of ISA and where it came from. If you want to take a look at how ISA did its homework to come up with these 5 pillars, it's really kind of an amazing process because it was very, very rigorous. You take Andy Ruth and you take Paul, and they both have a very long history of IT work in the industry, and they went about it very pragmatically. The first thing they did is they said, let's put together a qualitative analysis. If you put this many people in a room and ask there to be a definition for architecture, what's going to happen is we're going to get twice as many definitions as there are people in the room. So what they did is they went to small focus groups. We're talking groups of people, and these are the people that you saw in the board of the fellows, a lot of these people, to define what architecture is. Industry leaders, industry practitioners, people who are architects and passionate about the profession. And they asked them, let's define what architecture is. So the qualitative analysis was about 5 to 7 of these focus groups all over the world. And then what they decided is we need a quantitative analysis, meaning this is what these small groups say, let's throw it out to the masses. And with that, they created a 2-hour survey, and they sent it out to 7,000 members, select members of the ISA organization. You don't need to raise your hand, but if you were part of that survey, I would love to talk to you, just to get your impression on it. So the quantitative analysis is you take the small focus groups and you throw it out and find out what everybody says on that. And that's how they were able to refine what these pillars have come to be. Then you create your assets. The 5 pillars are part of the ISA assets. ISA is got quite a bit more, but the asset is looking at the as-is. The survey's captured where we are today and the to-be state, where we want to be in the future. I want to expand on that quantitative analysis. This is kind of what happens, is you throw this out there and you say to these 7,000 members, can you just help me out? I want to know what your current state is of architecture and where you are, and I want to know where your future state, where you want architecture to be. Because at this point in time, we're building the profession. And I'm going to throw in IEEE 1471, just in the mix. It's going to add a little flavor and aroma to what architecture is, because that's another standard, if you will, of definitions of what we're struggling with these 5 pillars. And out of this, what's been created, and there's about 500 documents today, and we call it the ITABOC, or ITABOC, the IT Architecture Body of Knowledge. And this is growing exponentially. right now. This IT architecture body of knowledge is just growing, and it's wonderful. So this is kind of the homework that was done in putting this together to build these pillars. And what came out of this survey was really very basic. You've got business technology strategy as one of the pillars. You've got human dynamics as a pillar. You've got quality attributes. You've probably heard of these things in one form or another. You've got your IT environment, and you've got design. Now, historically, what we found, because we do these C2P reviews, and I was part of the MCA organization as well, a lot of organizations have focused architecture on the design and IT environment. And that's not what we heard back from either the focus groups or the surveys. What we heard back was something completely different. We heard that the thing that we like the least, human dynamics of all things, this is interpersonal relationships and skills. I'm a geek. I like being in my little room tied to my computer, not having to interface with anyone other than other geeks. That's the number one pillar. Human dynamics was number one in terms of importance. If you take a look at very important and essential and add them together, human dynamics came up to number one. Number two is business technology strategy. Well, actually, it's number three. Number two is IT environment, then business technology strategy. So you've got two, I'm going to say, soft skills as primary on the top three enforcers of what's important to IT architecture. So I'm going to build the ISA skills matrix, and at the very end I'm going to give you a link where to download this so that you can rate yourself. But it begins with the foundational body of knowledge, and these are the 5 pillars. They're called the foundation. This is what is required of every architect, whether you're an information architect, a software architect, infrastructure architect, or enterprise architect. It's required of any architect, even a business architect. And that leads to what we have are the specializations. Basically, if you take the 5 pillars as the foundational skills, ISO recognizes currently 4 specializations. There's probably, I'm going to say, in the under 100, but there's a lot more types of architects that are out there. Application architects, SharePoint architects. I do a lot of SharePoint work. I understand there's specific things around products, architectures. But ISA is saying that we don't want to be tying ourselves to products like Cisco, SharePoint, .NET. We're going to say it's more generic because they're an independent organization, and they're saying software, infrastructure, information, and business are the specializations. On top of that, not on top of that, disconnected from that is enterprise architecture. Why did I correct myself and not say on top of that? There's sometimes a feeling in industry that enterprise architect manages and runs all the architects. And in some organizations, that might be the case. ISA doesn't think that should be the case. They look at enterprise architecture as a role, not as a specialization. It's a role. A lot of the businesses that we work with in the ISA organization, and then we're teaching this foundation class to, they have an enterprise architect for each of their business lines. Now, ISA doesn't have certification for enterprise architecture yet, but we're working on defining what that's going to be. So this is the skills matrix and how it's kind of put together. How many of you have heard of the MCA or thought about going after the MCA at some point, right? Microsoft has folded the MCA certification into the C2P certification that we'll talk about at the very, very end. But what happened to the MCA? Well, basically, Andy Ruth came from the MCA. What happened is part of building the 5 pillars came from the 7 competencies of the MCA. So this isn't replacing the MCA. This is like MCA 2.0, if you want to think about it that way. MCA had something that was really great, but it had one thing missing. It did not have the body of knowledge, and it did not have any instruction or training as to what architecture is. And that made it a very difficult certification to obtain because nobody could really understand what the MCA was to know how to prepare for it to pass the silly exam. With C2P, it's very clear, and there's a lot of instruction and training that you can take prior to that. That's a good thing. I'm very excited about that. Why? When I was doing MCA reviews, we might get 25% passage. Now that we do C2P reviews, we're getting 90, 95% passage. That's cool. I feel more effective that way. But these all map in to what we have in terms of the 5 pillars. But we're only going to focus on the 5 pillars today. So let's identify what is architecture. And this is made so you're not supposed to be able to read it. If you can read it, you've got great eyes. The idea here is there's a lot of definitions, and they're lengthy. Now, ISA likes definitions that can fit on a T-shirt. We should probably make T-shirts. We don't, but that's what ISA likes. The idea is that if you're in an elevator and you need to tell an executive what it is that architecture is, you don't want to start rambling what's in front of you right now. But ISA also does never take the stance that we can define something better than someone else. ISA absorbs what the industry has provided to date, and they absorb what its constituents, you guys, feed back to them and define what things should be. So what happens is these definitions are all part of the ISA definition. And these are all feeding into the belaboring that the ISA focus groups and the survey takers put into deciding this is what the definition is. So the definition that ISA's come up with is it's the art or science of designing and delivering valuable technology strategies. Now, as an architect, I look at that and say, wow, that's not exactly what I expected, but I like it. Why do I like it? Because it's not about me delivering solutions. It's not about me delivering projects on time, on budget. That's all part of architecture, but the definition is I'm delivering technology strategies. I'm a strategist. I'm delivering valuable technology strategies. I like that definition because it really puts us in a different place. A lot of this is based on the medical definitions, what a doctor is. This is a lot of where these arguments came from. Do I agree with this 100%? Do you? Don't raise your hand. I don't want to know. It's done. I don't necessarily agree with this 100%. What would I disagree with? The one word or. I'm a little curious why we landed on the word or, and actually we did because that was a huge debate and it lasted more than a day. The or upsets me a little bit because I think it should be and. I don't think that we architects are an artist or a scientist. I have a degree in physics. I'm a scientist, right? I play trumpet. I'm an artist. Okay? I think it should be and. I think it needs to be you're an artist and a scientist because I can't think of a single architecture that I've ever put together that didn't have elements of both. But I lost that battle, and so did Andy Ruth. But I'm comfortable with the decision that was made because it was ratified by the constituents of ISA. So I'm comfortable with this definition. While I might have a little bit of objection to it, I'm really comfortable saying that that is the definition. ISA wants to make architecture a profession. A profession. That's what doctors are. That's what accountants are. Question, are managers a profession? If I get an MBA, am I part of a profession? I'm not qualified to answer that, but the Harvard Business Review this year put an article together, and it's titled, The Big Idea, No. Management is not a profession. That's like, really? So the way it kind of works is, I want to read this to you, so I want to quote it in its context. The Harvard Business Review states that professions are made up of particular categories of people from whom we seek advice and services because they have knowledge and skills that we do not. Okay, managers can't do that, but we can. Okay, so that's One for architecture. I'm excited about that. I like that definition. So if architecture is defined as the science or art of designing and delivering valuable technology strategy, and it's a profession, what's that make an IT architect? Good question. Well, here's a bunch of definitions. It could be that we're the person that does business modeling from an IT perspective. Or it could be that we drive quick iterative processes for creating code. Maybe we're the person that does advanced engineering and design, right? Or maybe it's the person that selects the frameworks that we're using and the products that we're building upon. Or it could be the person that leverages all the right services. Maybe it's all of these. Reality, it is all of these. But that doesn't fit on a t-shirt. We have a dilemma. What are we going to call an architect? Well, if we go back to the definition, the art or science, and it had strategy in there, technology strategy. The definition from ISA for an architect is it's an IT architect is the technology strategist for the business. I really like that definition because it doesn't make me the provider, the developer. Those are all important parts. It makes me a technology strategist. I look at this and I read this and I realize this is a definition of my profession that lets me talk to people I normally don't get to talk to. When I was starting out before I became a partner at Metrics, I would talk to the managers of development projects, right? Today I talk to the CEO, mostly the CIO and the CFO. How do you get from here to there? And we can talk about that later. But basically, this is why you're a technology strategist for the business, not for IT, for the business. So now let me ask you, are you an architect? Don't answer yet. Let's go through some more. We're going to start with business technology strategy. As I teach this course all over the world, this pillar is the hardest to absorb for many. Why is that? Well, we'll find out. Business technology strategy by ICE is defined as the skills required for an architect to identify, design, plan, and support a technology environment that provides the basis of competitive advantage for the company. I especially like the last part, provides the basis of a competitive advantage for the company. That means business technology strategy does not going to have a lot to do with the IT of IT. If we take a look at it, it starts with business skills. And you've got some basic business skills and competence are required. It's going to be how the organization fits into the competitive landscape. You guys maybe work for a company. Is your company competitive? Hopefully it is, and that's why you're here, to become more competitive. How come, if I were to ask you, how come your company's competitive, what would you say? I'd be curious about that. I'd be curious to hear what you say to me, what you're thinking now, and maybe what you're thinking after we go through a little exercise. And I'm going to go down to the bottom one, because the aligning with business goals, we hear that way too much. You need to know what the business of the business is. And a lot of times the business of the business is not what it seems. I want to throw an example out to you, a little case study. And this is the only one I'm going to do a case study on because this is the one that when I'm teaching the course, it gets the most pushback as, you know, I'm just not grasping what you're saying here. So let me see if this helps. The example case study is Meijer. You've probably not heard of Meijer because it's only in the Midwest in the United States, and it is a grocery store and a department store. And it's probably like, is it Tesco? Is that what's a lot in Europe? Aldi, Lidl, these kinds of things. But it has the department store, and you're familiar with Walmart, right? And the superstore. It's like the Walmart superstore, but they did it 30 years before Walmart. Walmart's tried to buy Meijer out many times and has failed. It's a private company, and it's very successful. So the question is, what's the business of Meijer? And I'm going to walk you through that. And you have a disadvantage because you don't know what Meijer is, so you only know so far it's a grocery store and a department store kind of combined. So let's add another element. Fred and Hank Meyer founded Meyer. Hank's the actual founder. Fred was only 14 years old when they founded it. But Fred is a philanthropist. He's a global philanthropist. He's a philanthropist on the level of Bill Gates. That's what kind of money Meyer has generated. So you're wondering, I've not heard of Meyer, and they've got that much money. Whoa, what's going on here? Good. I want you to wonder that. Next part is Fred is a philanthropist of the arts. He loves sculptures. Anybody here from Italy? A few. Okay. Have you seen this? This is the Da Vinci horse. It's 10 meters high. They were building this in Italy, and they ran out of funds, right? So what did they do? They went to the one guy in the world that loves sculpture and has a lot of money that they knew, and that was Fred Meyer. They said, Fred, could you help us fund the building of this Da Vinci horse? And he said, absolutely. I am so excited that you're doing that. He said, but there's one condition. He goes, we're going to build 2 horses. You're going to get one in Italy with half the original parts, and we're going to get one in Grand Rapids, Michigan with the other half of the parts. And that's exactly what he did. So the pride and joy of Grand Rapids, Michigan is this horse. I kid you not. We are so excited to have it. There's a lot of money going around on a company that's groceries, right? Who knows what the profit margin of a grocery store is? Just shout it out. Under 10%? It's 2%. That profit margin of a grocery store on average is about 2%, the same as machine tool. I know because I've worked with both. 2% margin does not get you this kind of money. So Meyer's in another business, right? Maybe they're in a shady business. Maybe they're doing something we don't know about. No, that's not the case. You can actually go to their website and you can find out that the business Meyer's in that brings them the highest profit, real estate. Whoa, where did that come from? Real estate. Not the kind of real estate like I'm buying a house. It's the kind of real estate like I want to put my grocery store on a piece of land somewhere in the world, and I don't own the land, so I'm going to lease it, right? Meyer owns most all the land that grocery stores in the world are on. That's how come they're so profitable. You guys know for a fact that he who owns the land has power, right? We all know that. That's the business that Meyer's in. Now, you would never know it by looking at their website. You would never know it by buying groceries for them your entire life like I have. But that is why they're profitable. I say that because they have a strategy. They have a strategy that's kept them running for 75 years of running and not being bought out by the big boys. So that is a strategy. Now, an IT architect that doesn't know that about their own company is missing something. That's the big point about that. That's understanding the strategy of the business. So getting back to the main topic on business technology strategy, I want to go over the main areas of this pillar, and it's the financials. First and foremost, total cost of ownership, cost-benefit analysis, return on investment, payback period, net present value, valuation, real options valuation, all the things that you get in a mini MBA course, you're going to have to practice as an architect. Not only do you need to practice these by knowing what they are and using them, you need to know when to use them and when not to use them. If I'm putting a solution together that's competing against open source versus a product that I want to buy, I might use total cost of ownership because the initial investment of purchasing open source is not going to be very high, but the total cost of owning open source may be very, very high. So these are the things that I'm going to use to convince the constituents, the stakeholders, the people paying for the project that I'm about to do, to get them to create what's going to be the best value to the business. Another part of business technology strategy is we've covered the business, let's cover the strategy. If we take a look at various tools for strategy, these have all been taught over the years at various tech eds and the strategic architect forums that Microsoft's put on, and I've got links to them in the notes of the slide deck. There are various strategy tools that can be used to create a strategy for your technology in addition to the very many methodologies that we have that we build applications with. Strategy tools are a way of communicating to executive management what it is that's going to be advantageous to adopt the solution that you're proposing. And then finally, understanding industry concerns, trends, conformance to standards, and compliance. What are the trends of the industry outside of your own specific world, your own company? What's going on in the industry? What are probably the two biggest things going on in the industry today? Probably cloud and devices, right? I mean, I'm geeked about the Windows Phone 7, right? I'm geeked about these tablet devices that are coming out, Android and Apple, and maybe what Microsoft may or may not tip their hand to. We have no idea. But, I mean, Office 365, I can't wait to get my company on that. I'm genuinely excited about these things. Now, they may not be applicable, but we're going to have to face them. If you're not dealing with iPads yet, you're going to, right? Because your consumers, your employees, the people that want to use the technology in your organization are going to start bringing in from home what they're using because they like it. It's how PCs infiltrated the mainframes. How many, other than me, that have gray hair remember the mainframe days and thought PCs were never going to go anywhere, right? They did. So I look at these new devices and I say, whoa, I better look at the industry thermometer on these things and see what's going on. Okay, well that gets us out of business technology strategy, and we're going to move on to IT environment. And this is our sweet spot. I mean, everybody in this room, come on. This is your sweet spot. I'm probably not going to tell you anything you don't already know. It's the skills in the functional and procedural aspects of technology organization to ascertain solution and organizational maturity. That's a nice way of putting it. I like the one on the bottom a little bit better because it gets to the nuts and bolts. It's how we run things, the maintenance and support of things, and it's how we create new things, forward engineering. And IT environment is going to cover various aspects, if you will, of the overall IT world. Application development is what we're going to start with, right? ISA doesn't care what methodology you're using for application development. All they care is you have a repeatable way of building applications consistently, in a timely manner, in a secure manner, that's going to be repeatable. Okay, so if you're going through a CDP exam or you're going after the ISA Foundation, it doesn't matter if you're locked into waterfall, spiral, agile on the bottom. It doesn't matter which one you're using. You need to be able to say why you're using it. And most companies have got their own adaptation of one of these. But let's just face it. The other thing ISA wants you to realize is that not one methodology is going to be right for all application solutions. It's not going to be. I've learned this time and time again. I was doing Innovation Works, was a solution I was doing that I used Agile because it was a new company. They wanted to be able to change things along the way. Fixed budget, Agile, and changing stakeholders is an anti-pattern, okay? It's a pattern for disaster. I had a fixed budget. I wanted to use Agile, which means you go through 2-week iterations, but if the stakeholders change, they want to start at the very, very beginning each iteration. And it's on a fixed budget, so I had to carry the cost of that, right? Yikes, that's a little bit expensive when you're carrying the cost of that. So you need to be able to adapt a methodology to the situation you're in. Infrastructure is part of IT environment. Wait. Infrastructure, I'm a software architect. I don't care about no stinking infrastructure, right? Infrastructure guys are going to start throwing tomatoes. I do care about infrastructure. In fact, I want infrastructure arm-locked with me when we're designing this system, because when I throw my application over the fence and they say, no, you can't run that in my infrastructure because you're running everything as administrator, I need to be aware of that. I need to understand why I can't run everything as administrator, because it works great on my laptop when I'm building this thing. So these are the things that all architects, business architects, information architects, and even software architects need to understand the infrastructure. They don't need to be an expert, but they need to have a base knowledge in infrastructure. Of course, an infrastructure architect is going to have that already. Technical project management. No matter what architect type you are, you're going to be involved in some level of project management. So you need to interface with project management and basically working with the office of the PMO. Platforms and frameworks. This is the bread and butter of the IT environment. What platform and what framework am I going to be using? Is it a .NET framework that I'm going to be using? What about building an application on SharePoint as a platform? Building a web-based application like Energizer, the Energizer battery sites built on SharePoint, the public site. Swiss Army knives is built on the SharePoint platform. Why? Well, there's a business value to it. It's going to cost less because you can do more with the platform than writing it from scratch every time. Sometimes, not always. There are times when you do have to write things from scratch, and you know when that is because you're architects. Change management. If an architect is experienced, I'm going to say 20 years experienced, you guys are going to be the ones that really know change management and when to say, I would be happy to make that modification for you. All I need is $10,000 more and one more resource, right? It's us young guys, and I say young guys because I still make the mistake, and I consider myself young. Well, okay. They will often say, yeah, I'll make that change, but I don't ask anything back for it. So ISA has very specific training under change management. Asset management. I'm going to throw portfolio management in as well. What are the assets of my organization? What are the software assets? What are the hardware assets? You know, what are the people assets? If I've got a team that gels, that's an asset, meaning I want this team to work on the next critical project because they all work well together. Asset management is a very big part of the IT environment. And then governance. Governance goes two ways. Governance comes from the perspective that our enterprise architecture might have a governance that we have to adhere to. You know, are you doing architectural reviews, if you will? And then there's the governance that we're going to place upon our constituents or stakeholders. Are we going to make sure that the people managing this system follow certain rules? So IT environment covers both of those. Last but not least is testing methods, tools, and techniques. It's obvious that we have to do quality assurance on the solutions that we're providing. And this pillar has that built into it at this point. I'm not going to go into that too much because I think we all understand test-driven development. We understand building test cases and regression testing, etc. So if you kind of look at the left here, it's best if you're familiar with the industry trends, the leaders of a specific application space, and why they're leaders. You're going to follow, I like TechMeme, is that what it is, .com? I like following that blog because it covers all the articles that are prevalent in the industry. And they're picking the people that are leaders in the industry as who they highlight. I like looking at the benefits and limitations of methodologies and technologies. I like doing that because I like never to get locked into one. When is it better to write something in .NET versus using SharePoint, for instance, or Biztalk? When is it better to use Biztalk and not write an integration in, you know, WPF or something? So these are the things, the trade-offs that we're kind of looking at. And that kind of gets into the various things, and you can read the rest. It gets into the what I call balance. And I say I really mean ISA. ISA has a very good section on balance. You know, you've got a balance, do I buy, do I build, right? These are questions that you're coming with to this conference. You know, do I want to buy the next framework or do I want to build it myself? And then you've got agile, waterfall, the methodologies that you have to choose from. And then you've also got, do I write a standalone application or do I write one that's interoperable? Now, a lot of the customers that I'm working with are Fortune 500s in terms of teaching the ISA curriculum. When we're teaching the ISA curriculum, I like to ask them, in your portfolio, how many interoperable applications do you have versus all of your applications? And I'm going to throw some numbers that are real, but not who they're for. But let's say I've got 800 applications in my portfolio. Of those 800, 50 are interoperable, meaning 50 actually communicate with each other. So the enterprise architect in a situation like this is going to start making decisions. I'm going to start cutting applications. And it's not going to be from the 50 interoperable ones. It's going to be from the 800 or 750 that are standalones, because I can start consolidating those easier than the ones that are interoperable. Just kind of a gauge, if you will, about balance. That gets us out of IT environment and into quality attributes. Quality attributes are really kind of fun. They're non-functional characteristics. You've heard them called systemic qualities, maybe, and they're cross-cutting. They cross-cut across every concern of the development process, the architecture process, the business process. So let's build this out a little bit. ISA has some really cool groupings of the quality attributes. This is one thing I've actually printed and I put in front of my desk. The quality attributes are grouped by usage, development, operation, and security. Now, there's a lot of quality attributes or the ilities, and the concern you often have is which ones do I use? Do I use them all? You know, they're cross-cutting. I'm going to get down this. Do I use them all, or do I choose the ones that I'm going to use? This bullet right here is a very harsh reality. It's very harsh. Time, cost, and requirement and resource constraints can become a trade-off in applying quality attributes. I have the best intentions to make it reliable, extensible, all the ilities. But you know what? I don't have time to do it right now. So I'm just going to kind of throw the reliability out for right now. We'll come back and clean that up next phase. And the extensibility, I'm only going to make it work in one situation, because we've got to get this done by the 1st of December, so we don't have time to do it right. Quality attributes are the first thing to get thrown in the toilet, you know, when push comes to shove. They're the first thing to be hit as a hammer on your head when you release, because you didn't address them. And that's the double-edged sword of quality attributes. We throw them out first, and it's the first thing that stabs us when we release. So I can't put enough emphasis on the importance of quality attributes, but it gets better. They need to be measurable and monitored. How many times have we put in, it's going to be usable, usability. It's going to be performance, a performance. It has to perform in such and such a way, right? But we don't write monitors in the application we're architecting and developing. We don't put monitors to prove that we're meeting these requirements. If you're going to choose quality attributes, generally you're going to choose between 3 and 5 on an application. 3 and 5 are going to be the most important quality attributes. Why don't we put measures and monitors on them in our solutions? I think that we expect our frameworks to do it for us, but that may not work. That may not be enough for us. The other thing is it needs to be practical. How many times have you said, we're going to make this solution 5 nines reliable, and didn't realize 5 nines means you're down 5 minutes a year? Eee. How many times have you had a stakeholder say, I need it up 24/7, right? And you're like, okay, we'll do that. We'll put in a cluster of database. We'll put in 20 web servers, and we'll put in. Do you really realize we can't achieve 24/7? It's impossible. We might, out of luck, have done it for the last year or 2 years, but something's going to happen. The spindle on a hard drive is going to fail at some point, right? Something's going to happen. I like this because people don't realize what 5 nines means. My provider for my SharePoint services and email gives me a 95% SLA. When I asked him, what's the SLA? And he said 95%. I said, good. That means you're honest. That means you know what you're talking about. That's one of the gauges I use in a C2P review. I'll ask them, well, how many nines of reliability were you? And they'll say, oh, we were 5 nines. I'll say, well, what does that mean? Oh, it means we're going to be up all the time. Okay, what does that mean? Now you know what it means. When you come to a CDP review, quote this. This is another one I like to print off and put on my desk. Quality attributes interact with each other. And I like this slide. Someone from ISA put this together, one of the members. Stephen Cohen, I think is his name. And what he did is he said, certain quality attributes, they're going to help each other. Certain quality attributes are going to be indifferent. All the checks means they don't really help or hurt anything. And then they might hurt each other, the minuses. So if I'm going for, let's say, customizability, I want to write an interface that's customizable. Well, if I want it to be personalizable as well, they're going to work against each other. And I have to realize that. But if I want to create something that's maintainable and localized, they're going to work with each other. So these things are, it's just a nice graph to have to understand the interactions of quality attributes. And when we're teaching the course, we like to talk a little bit about judging the pairs. If you're going to work with, say, 3 to 5 quality attributes, you need to identify when they're going to work with each other, against each other, or be indifferent. And that gets us out of quality attributes and into design, which is another thing that I don't need to talk to you guys. It's called preaching to the choir, right? Because really, you guys are designers already. But let's talk about what that means. And this is from the ISA perspective. Design skills are an architect's primary tool in delivering architecture strategy and product to the business. I love the word the ISA use consistently. They're going with the theme that you are a technology strategist for the business. Your design is a strategy that you're delivering to the business. Good design is justifications, reasons, and trade-off considerations. And another way to put it, it encompasses capturing the decisions made. When I talk about my architectures and your architectures, we talk about the decisions that were made. A design is a result of many, many decisions. The better documented those decisions are, the better you're going to have in creating a longevity in your architecture. I'm going to give you an example, and it always happens when I've got changing stakeholders. Am I the only person on the planet that has stakeholders that change? Can you help me out? Do you guys run into that too? Just raise a hand if you do. Okay. Thank you, because I feel like a total failure because I learn so many lessons every time they change. The last part of this is capturing the decisions. I finished a project on the 1st of September, and we're done with phase 1. We're going into phase 2 right now. In the project, we made a conscious decision. It had an element of doing what I call a SME blast, subject matter expert blast. We sent an email out as part of the workflow to all the subject matter experts for their help on something. And we made a conscious decision that we sent it to everyone because let's say the gentleman here in the corner is a Biztalk expert and the gentleman over here is a SharePoint expert. We figured that just because you're a SharePoint expert, you might know a little bit about Biztalk and be able to answer a Biztalk question. And just because you're a Biztalk, well, let's face it, if you're a Biztalk expert, you're an expert at everything. It doesn't matter. So, you might be able to answer a SharePoint answer. So we made a conscious design decision, documented it, videotaped the decision that SME Blast goes to every subject matter expert regardless of what discipline they're an expert in. We're back in the next phase, and we had a change of stakeholders, and the guy said, we redesigned this whole SME Blast idea. We decided that the SME Blast has got to go to the person only that has expertise in that pillar. If you're SharePoint, you're going to get the SharePoint questions. If you're BizTalk, you're only going to get the BizTalk questions. I'm like, no, that's not what we did. We made a decision. Our architecture had a decision on that, and I pulled that decision out. I played the video. I re-went over all the arguments for it, and they go, oh, wow. Okay, yeah, you guys were right the first time. So that's kind of the part of design, if you will, that needs to be very well documented. And there are templates, by the way. There are templates for putting this together so that you can come back to it like that. Get to the next slide. Here we go. So design implies Knowledge of methodologies and techniques. Now, I'm not talking about the application development methodologies. I'm talking about design methodologies and design techniques. And these can be things like our model-driven development, service-oriented architectures, and things like that. Knowledge of tools for design. What modeling tools are you doing? Has anybody played with the Visual Studio modeling tools? The things that, they're kind of cool, actually. They're kind of nice. They're very helpful. Knowledge of design artifacts such as patterns, styles, views, and viewpoints. Views and viewpoints is very big at ISA. If you're in a C2P review, we're going to talk about views and viewpoints at some point. If I want to give you, I'm going to put it more of a developer programmer, because that's my background, base of a view and a viewpoint. A viewpoint would be the class definition. A view would be the instantiation of that class. So I might have one class definition for a viewpoint for stakeholders. The view would be the stakeholders on this project written to the guidance of that viewpoint. So that's an important part of design. All design decisions, elements, and artifacts should tie to a business requirement. I need a bigger soapbox than this to stand on right now, because this is really important. 10 to 50% of the scope creep of our projects we introduce in the design phase. Yee. It really came to a head when Andy, Ruth, and I were teaching the foundations course. And we were doing an example of putting a generic architecture together. And he was the stakeholder and I was the architect, and I whiteboarded a solution. And I put an element in there, let's say a DMZ. I put a DMZ in there, and Andy asked, Jim, what's that DMZ in there for? I said, well, it's just a best practice. We need an obfuscation. We need a layer to protect us. He goes, but Jim, the solution I wanted is internal use only. Yeah, I know, Andy, but if you ever want to go out, did I say I want to go out? No, but if you ever want to have external access to this, you've got to have, I don't want external access to this. This is for internal use only. He goes, why did you put a lot of work in and a lot of money for that DMZ that I don't need? And I said, well, because it's the best practice. He goes, but that's not what I asked. I couldn't tie that design to a business requirement. There was no requirement for external access to the system. I couldn't tie it, but I put it in anyway. You know, shame on me. Come on. Well, that's one of the problems, and what we ask our architects in our class to do when we're putting our architectures together, we put numbers of every element in the design on the diagram, and that number goes back to a business requirement. It could be 12.1.3, and that goes to requirement 12.1.3. And the reason is at some point somebody's going to ask you why the design is this way. And you can go right to that requirement and put the justification why it has to be that way. It's a great way of documenting. So that's kind of my big soapbox. If you can't tie it to the business requirement, rip it out. Take it out. Now, change management comes into place. If they want it at a later date, great. Make them pay for it, right? Seriously. Get the resources, get the time, get the budget, and put it in the right way. But if they don't ask for it, and the other thing is be honest with them. Ask them, are you sure you don't want any access out of this? You know, it kind of gets into the double-edged sword of, I don't need it to be fast, I just need it to work, when they give you that argument. And as soon as you get it to work, the compliment you get is, you never hear, oh, you got it to work wonderful, you did a good job. What you hear is, oh, it's not fast enough, right? When I hear them say, well, it's not fast enough, I go, yes, I nailed it. It works. We don't hear those words, but that's the interpretation. That's how I can go to work with a smile on my face, because I know how to interpret these things. Okay, so design, whole systems design. Don't worry about reading this. Let me just summarize. Basically, you want to highlight the whole system. You want to look at the entire system and systems of system, how they interact and exist in parallel and also the whole environment as a consideration. So when I'm putting a solution in to a customer, and I'm a consultant, so I go into other organizations and we need a SharePoint solution. Okay, where are you using SharePoint elsewhere in the organization? Give me the big picture. Oh, well, we're using it, that division's using it over there, that division's using it over there, and that division's using it over there. So we want to use it. Okay, but are you all using it together? Oh, no, we work autonomously. Okay, well, let's think about, do we want to work all together, and put a business case together? That's just an example. The whole design encompasses the industry perspectives that are outside as well as inside the doors that you work with, because it may impact your architecture. I don't need it to be Twitter compatible, okay, for instance, but maybe you will at some point. And maybe it's because the business stakeholders and analysts don't know what Twitter is and what it can do for them, right? So can you please tweet right now, those of you who are, Jim just talked about Twitter. No. The idea is that you've got to look at it outside the box. I've seen some T-shirts around that say, think way outside the box, and I like that idea. I really like that idea. Okay, the last I saved for last because it's the one that's most important and the one that we don't struggle with the most. It's the one we want to avoid. It's human dynamics. And it's the one that the surveys found to be the most important. By the way, I forgot to mention, just because I'm on the roll and I forget the important thing, one of the things that was interesting about monitoring your quality attributes, and I apologize for jumping context for a second, is that 25% of the respondents don't monitor their quality attributes. That was a really interesting point. That was a real awakening, because they think quality attributes are important, yet they don't monitor them. Human dynamics we think is important, and again, how do we know how to do human dynamics? How do we know how to interface with various people? I like this one because I've learned this lesson time and time again. I'll give you just a simple story. When I was in writing operating systems for boroughs, I won a Lifetime Achievement Award at age 26. And that's a little bit young to be given that award, because I went into aerospace and my head wasn't this big. It was as big as this room, right? And my manager had to pull me aside and say, Jim, I need you to take a few weeks off. We're going to put you into an interpersonal communications course. I said, okay. And I learned a lot. I'm going to kind of buzz through these, but take a look at this. Managing the culture. What is that? It's politics, right? Managing the culture is politics. We don't want to have to deal with politics. Architects deal with politics. I need to understand customer relations. There's a lot of psychology in these, by the way. What are the customer's expectations of the business strategy? I need to manage that. Leadership and management, mentoring. If you're in a CDP review and we ask you why you're a leader, you start with the word mentor, right? I don't want to know that you're the president of the SharePoint users group. That's good. Thank you. How are you mentoring people to know what you know? Peer interaction. Do you play well with others, especially other architects? How do you play well with other architects? Collaboration and negotiation. Guess what? More politics. Gotta love politics. Presentation skills. You know what? You need to understand your audience. How many people have had the privilege of doing a presentation, let's say, to an executive management? Okay. You want to keep it to what? About 4 slides? Okay. Now, let me understand. You got to understand why 4 slides. It's not because they're dumb. It's actually because they're so smart. You're going to give them a little bit, and they're going to be able to take a lot and understand where you're going on that. You need the 20 to 30 slides as an appendix if they want you to prove why you said what you said. But a lot of times you keep it very simple to that audience. Writing skills, quality over quantity. All I'm going to say here is that metrics reporting has a philosophy of everything on one page. If I write you a proposal for $10,000, it's on one page. If I write you a proposal for $500,000, it's on one page. It's a quality document, not a quantity document, because if I write you a 60-page proposal, you won't read it, right? And it will sit on your desk, and we'll never have that conversation again. So that's one of the things on writing skills. There's a book in the references. And the platinum rule is do unto others as they'd like done unto them. And basically, it's looking at, it says 4, but it's actually 16 personality types and how you find out what your personality type is and how you interact with each other. There's a lot of books. I just threw this book out because I like it. But there are other books that help you with those interpersonal communication skills. And that gets us at the end of the pillars, about the end of our time, and I'm going to ask you one more time, are you an architect? And do you care? Actually, you do care. CNN Money just released weeks ago their Best Jobs in America survey. Architect is number one. Number one over doctors, lawyers, biochemical engineers, actuaries. Didn't know what actuary is, but we're number one. It really matters. I just threw up here what the others are, but we're getting out of time, so I'm going to just kind of, you can look at these on your own. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. That's a Buddhist proverb. Microsoft has been funding architectural discussions for, I'm going to say, 5 to 6 years at Tech Readies, and I want to say they're very diligent in providing this information to you because we really want architecture to be part of our practice. It's just now getting momentum. You're going to make the decision whether we continue this process or not, because you're the reason why we have architecture in the tech ed. You're also the reason why we might not have architecture in the tech ed. Not to sound like a PBS, please send us your funds, but be honest in your, your evaluations. So now let's just finish your call to action. I want you to download the skills matrix and fill it out. And it's basically you rate yourself a 1 to 10, okay? I want you to fill it out. I want you to look at that, and I want you to ask yourself, do I need to improve? Be realistic. Do I really, really need to improve? Or, you know, I can improve in anything, but I'm pretty much there. If the answer is no, I'm pretty much there, I don't need to improve, consider C2P certification or ISA Foundation certification. If you don't need to improve, by golly, go and get one of these certifications because they're going in the industry. People are really going after architects with these credentials these days. But let's say you do need to improve, and this is a takeaway. There's a link to this Architecture Foundation. Miha Kroll, who if you haven't heard him present, you just got to go here and present. He put IT Foundation, the 5 pillars, in 30 days. You can actually do a self-study of these 5 pillars in 30 days and get a sound education of the foundation. At the very bottom, you could also take one of the ISA Foundation courses. I've been teaching these courses mostly to architects with 10 to 20 years experience, and it has been tremendous. It has just been tremendous. So with that, there's the links that you can learn more from, everything that we've referred to in the talk. And I ask you to please fill out a survey because your evaluations, not only do we take the information personally, what you say about the talk, but what architecture is. IT architecture has 8 sessions this tech ed. We had 18 last year based on your response. Just want to let you know that. So basically, you're going to be the driving as to whether we can do this again or not. I hope that you think it is, but if it's not of value to you, then be honest with yourself about it. But I do want to say that ISA is committed to IT architecture. They have conferences, they have education, they have a brand new website. I think it's www.isaglobal.org. It's on my notes. So you're all set and ready to go if you want to pursue things through ISA, become an ISA member. So with that, I went over 3 minutes, 42 seconds. I apologize, but I appreciate your patience and I appreciate you coming today. So thank you. Thank you very much.